Now that our model is complete, we want to prepare it for work in Keyshots. And some of the things that we want to do is that we want to make sure that our objects, our elements are on discrete layers. And we organize this model pretty well so that everything should work out fine. But the thing that we always must remember is that Keyshot, as it relates to Rhino, is a layer dependent renderer. So the way that you organize your materials for your models is by assigning them to different layers. And it's a good thing to give them relevant names so that it will make sense when we see this in Keyshot and we can develop an organized strategy for how we want to surface our models. Okay, and so I'm going to leave this right here, and we're going to move on to our next segment, which is our Keyshot segment. Okay, we start by opening our model in Keyshot. And let's retain our axis, our setup, and our model comes into Keyshot. Now note that our model has the colors that we assigned in Rhino, and that's very important that it has that. Some basic navigation things: your left mouse button, dollies, middle scroll wheel pans, scroll wheels zooms, control right mouse button interactive zooms, like so. Okay, and what we want to do, the first thing that we want to do is that we want to set up our workspace, and we use our presets to do that. All of our documents are done in US tabloid, or 11 by 17. And once we've done that, we sort of want to lock that aspect ratio, and now we can sort of like increase the size of the work area, and it'll retain that aspect ratio. And it becomes really important for when we are rendering. The next thing that we want to do is that we want to set up our camera. We're going to go into our camera, and we want to go into grids where it says grid right here. We want to change that from none to rule of thirds. Now we're going to talk about Keyshot a lot more in detail, but I just wanted to give you a little taste of it so that you can begin to use it for your models. Now I kind of like this shot right here. I like to line up my shots before I assign materials, and generally I like to have like one establishing shot and then another shot that is more of a what I'd like to say is a pedestrian view. Now, one of the things that we like to do is that we really like to have our model centered like this. We use the rule of thirds grid because it's a compositional tool that helps us to compose our model, and I generally don't like to have my model centered, especially doing a centered and floating like that, unless it's trying to communicate something. So in this case, I'm going to move this over off center a little bit, and remember that in a lot of our models we're going to put in a title and your name, and you want to, and down the line we're going to do orthographics, so you want to have some room. And so generally I'd sort of do like a rule of thirds things where I'll shift it off to the side like this. Okay, we're going to talk about Keyshot in a lot more detail during week 3, but I thought that you might want a little taste of it as it relates to this project. Now, once I have a shot like this that I like, that I'm happy with, that I can work with, generally what I'd like to do, I like to go to my camera and I like to add a camera, and I'll call that shot 1. So I'll name my shots, and that's shot 1. And now I'm going to go in, I'm going to do a more detailed shot. This gives me sort of a pedestrian view of my model. I like that one below there, but the lighting's not good there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and take a more of a detailed pedestrian view. And I'm trying to, in this case, I'm trying to follow a compositional rule that I want to break at least 3 of the picture planes in this shot, my detail shot. And let me pull it in a little tighter here, and we're going to do something that looks like that. And I might zoom out just a little bit to do something like that, and I'm going to shift this off to the side like that. And we'll leave it at that for right now. Okay. Now, and I'm going to come over here at another camera, and I'm going to call that shot 2. Okay. And now I can go, you notice the Keyshot is broken up into, on one side, project side, we have scene, materials, environment, camera, settings. We'll talk more about these, as I said. And over here we have our libraries, we have the materials, we have our colors, your environments, backgrounds, textures, and favorites. Okay, but we're going to just come over here to the Materials tab, and I'm going to go to the Scene, which brings up my elements. If I open this, it brings up my layers in Rhino. And I'm also going to open up my Materials tab, and here are my materials. And I'm just going to use some hard plastics right now. And so for my concrete right here, or I can come over here with my hard plastic, and I'm going to take this white, and I'm going to drag that onto my concrete, like so. And you notice that all my concrete elements turn white. The blue, those were railings, so I'm going to go with a metal. And I'm going to find an aluminum that I can use, a brushed aluminum. And I can come into the scene and I can actually drag it on top of that. I don't like that. That has a texture. I just want a simple brushed aluminum in this case. And let me use since we have the aluminum, I'm going to use a blue aluminum, like so. I'm going to add it to that material. For these elements right here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to, since that's another metallic element, I'll add a red to that. And here we have those pink elements there. I'm going to go with an anodized gray for those. And here, I'm going to go with a clear material. I'm going to go with a glass for this because I want it to be transparent. And so I'm looking at my compositional elements. I got this red, this blue, the grays here, and I'm going to add this refractive glass, like so. And Keyshot is a mental ray renderer, so that all the materials are assigned scientifically. Okay, and here I basically set up my shot, and what I could do at this point, I could go in and I could render this shot. Okay, and what I want to do in my render tab is to set the output folder, and in this case it's going to be in my documents area. I have my folder set up called Tutorial Movies, Castle, Converted, and I'm going to call this Shot 1. Okay, I'm going to select this folder, and I'm going to call this Shot 1. And I'm going to set the image style to TIFF, and I'm not going to include alpha and transparency in this. And here, what I want to do, I'm going to set this to 150 dpi, and I'm going to set this to 17, and that's approximately 17 by 11, and I'm going to now render this out. Okay, and I'm going to pause this while it renders, but I want you to see and get a sense of how it goes about rendering an image. And I'm going to pause this while this renders. Okay, the rendering is now complete. Always remember, once your rendering is complete in Keyshot, to close it out so that you can get back to work, and you actually have to close this window now. And I'm going to go to my camera, and I'm going to go to Shot 1, And notice how that's laid out right here. And I'm going to render that one out. And it's already shot up. And this will increment up for you. And it maintains the information that you set up. And we're going to render that out. And I'm going to let this get started. And I'm going to pause this also. Okay, this is now completed rendering, and let me close this. Now, all that you really need to do this week, as I said, we're going to talk more about Keyshot. If you wanted to, you could go to your scene, and you could do sort of what we would call sort of like a faux ambient occlusion rendering, or a basic rendering where we take a plastic, and we get like a white, we get a nice hard plastic, rough surface, and you could take the white right here, and if you take it all the way to the top, to the first node up at the top, it paints everything in the scene that color, okay? And then if you like, I'm going to go into my environment and make sure that my ground shadows are on. Let me turn on ground reflection so I get a little ground reflection. That's a nice touch. I could play with my contrast a little bit if I wanted to. I could play around with size, but once again, we'll talk about how you can rotate your environmental lighting. And in my settings, I'm going to turn on a global illumination in this case, and ground illumination, and up my shadow quality a little bit, and the number of ray bounces. And now I'm going to render this again. And let me go back to my environment and drop down my contrast a little bit. And I'm going to render that again. And I'll pause this while it renders. Okay, and now this rendering is complete. And for the first 2 weeks, this is all that you really need to do. But I'm sure that once you get inside here, you won't be able to contain yourself. And that's a quick introduction to Keyshot workflow as it relates to Rhino. And as I said earlier, we'll explore this further as we move through the semester.